So our topic today, before we, we'll introduce ourselves in a couple of minutes, but the topic today is looking at two parts of the sales process or the award process. One is how do we engage our leads? You know, once the leads come in, how do we engage with them? How do we contact them? How do we ensure that we're first in terms of speaking with them and getting them engaged and committed and motivated to continue the process? And then the other part of it is almost like the yin and the yang. What do you do when you have a candidate that's through the process, regardless of what part, whether it's upfront or towards the end or after discovery day, if you use your discovery day at the end of your award process, and you realize that either they're not a culture fit for you, they're not the right people. How do you disengage? So that one should be interesting. The one thing I will ask too is help us make this presentation as interactive as possible. I know we hear that all the time, but it really does make a difference because obviously we're here to share our experiences, and we have, I think, over 100 years of experience, maybe more than 100 years of.
That's just you and me, Tony.
That's true. That's true. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for pointing that out. But seriously, in addition to our experience, we certainly encourage, welcome your feedback as well. So let's start with the introductions. I'm Tony Padulo. I'm Chief Development Officer for School of Rock. And today I'm celebrating month 4. So I started with School of Rock June 12th of this year. For those of you who may not be familiar with the brand, we are the leader. We have 200 units. We're the leader in performance-based education. We have 200 schools in 9 countries. So we have 25 international schools right now. We have 20 corporate-owned schools and about 145 franchise schools. We are been franchising for about 10 years, so a relatively young company in terms of development. What differentiates our concept from many of other music lessons is that rather than focus on one-on-one lessons, we're very much about building bands. It's all performance-based. So it's really about helping children. It's primarily a child's education, although we do have an adult program, but it's all about building community. And we participate because of the name rock. Obviously, you know, we participate in several of the concerts. So even at my age this year, I attended my 2 first rock concerts, Summerfest in Milwaukee and Lollapalooza in Chicago. So I'm hoping the first 2 of many, many more over the years. For myself personally, I've got about 36 years experience always in franchise development. So I've worked in different segments, but always in franchise development. Most of my career was 22 years with Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins. 10 of those 22 years, I headed up the international development, so developed about 32, 33 countries throughout the world. From there, went to BP BP Arco, I should say, on the West Coast, where I put together a franchise revitalization program for them. Worked with Remax, and most recently I was at the Goddard School and Bright Star Care. I was their Executive VP of Global Franchise Development. So again, different segments from food to education, from seniors to now children again, but always in franchise development and real estate. Next, Tim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Tim Muir. I'm the Chief Development Officer with Focus Brands. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm excited to be here. Focus, we have 6 brands. So we have McAllister's, Moe's, Schlotzsky's, Annie Ann's Pretzels, Cinema Bun, and Carvel. We have 5,500 locations in 63 countries around the world. We're a global company. I oversee the franchising, construction, design, and real estate. I've spent 30 years in the franchise field. Actually, 30 of the years that I've spent has been on the hospitality end. I grew up right outside New York City. My dad used to run the Marlboro Blenheim in Atlantic City, so the Marlboro Blenheim is now Bally's. So grew up Atlantic City, went to undergrad at UNLV with my 2 brothers. We all graduated from UNLV. Atlantic City guys in Las Vegas, lots of fun. I sit on the board today at the UNLV Hotel School. Started my career out in franchising at Days Inns, and I was at IHG. I was the vice president on the West Coast. And on October 2nd, 1995, started a company called U.S. Franchise Systems. We were the founders of Microtel, Hawthorne Suites, America's Best Inns. We were private, went public. We sold the business in November of 2000 to the Pritzker family. Neil Aronson and Steve Romanello then started Rourke Capital. And I stayed on with my brother Michael, with Neil's uncle, Mike Levin. And transitioned, then we sold the company to Wyndham. Was at Wyndham as SVP for 5 years. And I was at Choice for 3 years. And I recently just joined Focus this year. So I'm excited to be here. And I saw Charles Watson here. Charles was with us at USFS. He worked with me and my brother. And we have a lot of friends in the audience. And again, it's nice to see a lot of people you care about.
Great, thanks. Noelle?
My name's Noelle Burak. I'm the franchise development manager for Two Men and a Truck. Two Men and a Truck has 377 locations. We're in the UK, Ireland, Canada, as well as all over the US in 41 states. My franchising experience is not quite as extensive as all these gentlemen up here. I've been with Two Men and a Truck for 5 years, but before that I was a pharmaceutical rep and worked in hospice care after that. So spent a lot of times in the medical field and developing techniques of working with people and coordinating multiple disciplines across different avenues of helping patients. And now I'm helping people develop businesses.
Great, thank you. Peter?
My name is Pete Baldine. I'm the president of Moran family of brands. We are primarily an automotive franchise company. We have 4 different brands: Mr. Transmission, Milex Complete Auto Care, Altamir Automotive Outfitters, which is an accessory business, and then our one non-automotive, which is SmartView Window Solutions, which is residential and commercial window film. So one of the things that's unique about us is that because of the different brands, we do a lot of co-branding options and give candidates the opportunity, and also our existing franchisees, the opportunity to put more than one franchise under one roof. And creates additional revenue streams for them, creates a lot of economies of scale with their, with their lead generation efforts, and works really well for us. And very rarely do we get a candidate that comes in now that wants a single brand. When they come in and they see what we're all about, they go, oh, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. I want to do 2. We just had, 2 partners sign on to do all 4 a couple weeks ago. So pretty exciting stuff. I love it. I've been with them. I joined Moran in 1999 and have been with them ever since in one capacity or another. And one of the things that's important in when we talk about franchise development, that's important in our selection process is we really try to find candidates that really share our core values, of what we call drive, dedication, respect, integrity, vision, and enthusiasm. And we want them to, to really share those core values to make sure that they're a good fit with us. My background is between franchising and multi-unit operations over 35 years. I started out first, my career goal was to be a college football coach, which I did for 2 years until the coach that hired me shipped me off to Utah to do him a favor for 2 months. Ended up, he was the founder of Jiffy Lube, and that was the end of my coaching career. I was employee number 4, ran the first Jiffy Lube in the country out in Salt Lake City, and worked with them for about 10 years in many different capacities. When I left, I was vice president of the Western region and had about 550 stores. I then joined a company in Memphis, Tennessee, called VVP America, and I started their retail division. It was all company-owned locations, and it was in the glass business, and then was recruited by a company called Globe Glass and Muir, which then, after a couple of acquisitions, became Safe Light. And I had about 120 company-owned locations doing over $100 million in sales at Safe Light, and then met the Moran folks in 1999. That's kind of my background. So combination between franchising and multi-unit operations is where I come from. So glad to be here.
Great, thanks, Pete. So just before we tackle our first question, just to get a sense of who's in the room, how many of you are franchisors? And are there franchisees as well? No, all franchisors. Franchisors, when you look at your award process, your starting process, how many of you use a pre-qualifier for your calls? Okay, and the others, I assume, don't. So it's almost a 50-50 split. Okay. So the first question we want to tackle today is when that lead first comes in, regardless of where they come from, whether it's a portal or web-generated or an ad or a trade show, I'll ask each of the panelists, what's your process and what do you do that you feel is either different or differentiates you as a top quality franchisor, and how do you ensure that franchisee is more motivated to stay with you into the process as opposed to shop around and go to other franchisors? So Tim, why don't you start us off?
So my big belief is transparency. When you engage with a customer, be transparent. I learned from my parents who are educators. My dad was in the military. Treat people the way you want to be treated. My style is more of a counterpuncher. I ask questions. God gave me 2 ears, 1 mouth. So in the first 10 minutes, it's more about, what do you know about Focus Brands? Do you have any experience? What are you looking for?
I'm sorry, Tim, do you use a pre-qualifier as well, or do they go straight to the sales executive when the lead comes in?
So we do have a pre-qualifier. I'm not crazy about the pre-qualifier myself. I don't think that a customer should be calling and the first greeting is someone qualifying them. So we have it, I restructured it different. But to me, it's about transparency, asking all the hard questions up front. We don't even talk about our brands. It's more, what are you looking for? What's your expectation? Tell me about yourself. Give me some background of your experience, wanting to know, do they have food service experience and what bucket I should put them in? Because we have 6 brands. And someone, like on McAllister's, we're really looking for multi-unit people. So just by asking really good questions up front, I think the thing we look for is making a personal connection with people. And I think it's very easy to engage with people after they talked for 10 minutes, and then I can repeat back to them. So what I'm hearing is what's important to you, and give all the things that they just told me was important to them up front. Then I think probably the most important thing, after you understand who they are, what they're looking for, what's their expectation, what's their experience, it might be on the money, it might be below, so now I have to counterpunch and overcome some concerns that they bring up. But I'll kind of do that at the end, is really listening after I understand their experience and I understand about the equity and the debt. And I'm a big believer, at least running the sales staff, is ask all the hard questions up front. I've been a franchisee and a franchisor. So when you're on the franchisor side, I think every company wants to make sure a person is qualified. And then secondly, I think the most important thing is, what is your expectation? What are you looking for? What's your time frame to make a decision? And then really putting that together. And then once you understand what they need, I like to lay out to them, okay, here's what we're looking for. Because sometimes people might not have the equity, so they need a partner. Sometimes they're not in line with what we need for certain brands. So it's taking a step back and saying, now I understand what you're looking for, let me tell you what we're looking for. Here's the liquidity you need. Do you have a site? Do you need help finding a site? Who's helping you? Who else is on your team? I always want to know if in the LLC, who's the decision maker? Who's the general partner? A lot of times I'm talking to a general manager or a person in operations, and maybe they're not going to have equity in the project, but they're doing all the engaging. And I think by understanding before being understood, at the end of the day, once you understand if there's a fit for both parties, I think the sale is very, very easy. But it really comes up front, having the discipline, asking the hard questions, understanding before being understood, and seeing if there's a fit. And no's okay, because there's a lot of people in my 30-year career I said no to. And a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, they got another partner. Sometimes, there's divorce and there's uncertainty and it's not right. Sometimes you have to understand what's right for your brand and what's the DNA and what you're looking for and try to match. And there's nothing wrong with giving a referral and passing it along to someone else, or just being transparent and honest, because at the end of the day, I think they bank on the way they're treated and the way everything's explained to them.
And that first call typically lasts how long, Tim? Because that's a lot of content that you're covering. So is it a fairly lengthy call?
So by the time the call comes to me, there's been a lot of conversations.
Okay.
But we have a large sales organization. We have 17 people. So the way we train them is find out, like I'm telling you, what is your expectation? What are you looking for? What's your brand experience? Sometimes the best selling is the easiest selling because they might be misled. They might think that the equity they have is enough and it's not enough. So it's really redirecting them so they can get in business for themselves and not by themselves.
And that first call, whether it's a pre-qualifier or whether it's one of your sales executives, are there any points or key messages that you're hoping to hear from the candidate? Are there any words that?
I think expectation. What do you know about focused brands?
Mm-hmm.
What's your experience? What's your time frame to make a decision? How much equity and debt do you have? Have you ever built a restaurant? Have you ever run a restaurant? What concerns do you have? I like to ask hard questions, like, what do you need from me to move forward in this project? And sometimes they're just not online. You kind of have to redirecting them back in the box.
And what are you looking for, at the end of the conversation?
I kind of look for four buckets. Number one is the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is equity and debt. How much equity do you have? Very easy question. You're building this all cash. Have you ever done an SBA loan? No. Do you need help doing an SBA loan? Yes. Well, we can help you. This is something that we do. So a lot is, once I understand before being understood, I know what they need. So it's the value added. I don't even have to really talk about the brands. I'm just trying to help them A to Z, from concept to idea to planning to preparation to raising the equity, kind of give them a vision of a calendar of here's the start, here's what you need to do, and kind of put everything together in the 4 boxes of experience, equity, debt. Do you have a site? I mean, very easy question.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't. They just have an idea and they know this location. We have a real estate team. Can we help you? Do you need help? What's your time frame? Do you have all your partners together? How much equity did you raise again? I keep asking the same question, so it revalidates if they tell me, oh, equity's not a problem. People say that a lot. Oh, equity's not a problem. I say, okay, great. How much equity are we talking about? Because sometimes it is a problem, They think they have it raised. And if you have to raise money, it's typically 90 to 180 days. So that'll go back to how much time we'll give them. And, you want to help the people that have the desire, have the financial wherewithal and equity and debt, and want to get in business. So.
Great, thank you. Noelle, what about your process?
So, unlike Tim's here, there's only 2 of us in the sales team, and so we do everything. So if there's a lead that comes in, it comes to me and Steve, the gentleman that I work with. There's 2 of us. It rings on both of our phones, and depending on where it comes from, if it comes through email or if it comes through on the phone or if it comes through a Facebook ad or anything, I think a good way is to who you're talking to is, do you know where they're from, what, side of the country they're on, or where they're looking at an opportunity. But really just asking open-ended questions in regards to who they are. And usually if you ask, tell me a little bit about yourself, they're pretty good at, talking about themselves and letting you know, and just kind of feeding the conversation from that point. But really, really listening. Listening not necessarily to solve a problem, but listening really to kind of engage them and hear who they are and what they're about, and just understand them. A lot of times they'll give you cues in regards to their background where you might have something that's similar to engage them in, or in regards to their personality or their attitude. Something that, sparks an interest in the business, but you can really listen. And I just listen. I know that's on a slide, but that's kind of, people are generally pretty good about giving you additional information if you just ask some open-ended questions.
And how quickly do you try to get back to a lead? Like when a lead comes in, are you calling them back within the day, or?
Generally within 24 hours. I would say if somebody's calling and leaving a message, if somebody's there and not answering the phone, we get back to them as soon as we possibly can.
What happens when a lead comes in over the weekend?
You answer it.
Okay, no, that's good. No, that's a good answer, because it's not a trick question, but it's something to think about, because a lot of us franchisors will think, well, we answer the same day, but it's a Monday to Friday situation, and the reality is most candidates are either working, have some other engagements, that their weekday is not the same as our weekday, right? And they're more likely to contact us either early morning or late afternoon or evening or the weekend. So it's interesting. Franchisors that say, well, we call within 15 minutes, but that applies Monday to Friday from 9 to 5, and then what do you do the rest of the weekend? So that's great that you take the trouble to do it.
And a lot of times if it's not a convenient time, or you might call somebody because they are at work, or they were just jumped on the internet at lunch and they saw something and they want to talk, is just ask them, is there a good time that we can schedule an appointment so we can discuss the opportunity a little bit more and answer your questions. And people are generally pretty good about setting up times that, if they're interested, in regards to a time that fits where you can take some time to answer questions.
And same question for you as Tim, from your perspective, are there any key words or key sentiments that you're looking for from that candidate on that first call? I know it's tough sometimes on the first call, but there's probably some key areas, right, that you want to hear?
I generally am not a huge fan if somebody tells me, like, hey, I got this all down, I know what I'm doing here, so just tell me how to fill out what I need to do to get it done. Those are kind of red flags in our area, because our process takes quite a bit of time. So generally when they're upfront and they tell me, don't worry, I know all about franchising, don't worry, I know all about this, it kind of throws off red flags.
Yeah.
But all in all, if we look for a lot of people with some type of business experience, sales, marketing, if they have teams that they manage, so, high level 30,000-foot view of being able to manage a business, reading a P&L, a balance sheet, being able to motivate employees to come to work. So any business experience is great.
Okay. Is your concept an owner-operated, or is it?
Nope. So, no. Generally, no. We don't see most of our owners on trucks. So you're employing teams to obviously go out on the trucks, and you're managing from that high view of every aspect of the business.
So with that perspective, then you're looking for a different type of candidate, right? As somebody who already has other businesses, or is
Yep,
working.
other businesses coming from, corporate America, different business experience, other franchise concepts we don't have a ton of, but we do have some.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you. And last question. At the end of the call, what are you looking for the next step? How do you get them engaged and say, yes, I want to move on to the next, whatever that is?
Kind of depending on where they're at in their process of discovering the business and engaging them in the business. So if they're just starting out and they're trying to learn more about 2-Minute Truck, like I said, if you're asking questions in regards to their experience and what they're interested in, you might be able to find an article or information that can kind of guide them into learning more about 2-Minute Truck. But definitely setting up a next step. So whether it be hey, let's, set up a time to talk next week and answer any questions in regards to the information that I'm sending you. Or if they are familiar with 2-Minute Truck and franchising and they are firing on all cylinders and are ready to go, I can send them an application and just say, I'll follow up with you, next week again in regards to all these items.
Right.
But really setting a follow-up in regards to that conversation, I think is a key.
Okay, great. Any questions so far? All right, Pete.
Oh, yeah.
Sir, go ahead.
Lead qualifying, where is this your qualifying process?
So we qualify them on the phone while we're sitting there and we're talking. I mean, just basically asking them, what's your experience? And then if we do have somebody that's wanting to fill out an application and get through the information, we do qualify them in regards to financially what we're looking for in regards to the opportunity. We ask them, do you meet those qualifications? Because in our application, we do require that you fill out a personal financial sheet. We do a background and credit check, so we just want to make sure that you meet those qualifications as you go through the process.
That's a great question, too. Just to follow up on that, in the audience, how many of you have any kind of, whether it's an application submission or any kind of written or more formal documentation needed before you talk to a candidate, or do you just go directly to the call? So who goes directly to a call, for example, when a lead comes in? Any of you have a requirement before you talk to a candidate? Do you want to just elaborate on that?
Sure, we don't have a written application requirement, and it's, requirement's a strong word. We strongly encourage multiple times before the first real call, and we have the qualification, quick little short qualification call, but before the first 30-minute call with me, they need to review our deeper dive overview. That gets rid of 95% of their questions. They understand our model at a much deeper level. We don't have a brick and mortar, so it's more of a conceptual service that they need to understand. So I ask them to review that before getting on a call with me, and it makes everything so much better.
So that first call, then I assume you have a pre-qualifier then who does that for, or is it you also do, who does that first call?
I have a couple of screeners,
Screeners.
pre-qualifiers. And 90% of my legit leads come from brokers, so they're pretty
Okay,
pre-qualified already.
so they're already pre-qualified, right, okay. All right, got it. Pete, how about yourself?
Yeah, so first of all, I agree with everything that my two partners here talked about, so I'm going to try to talk about a couple of different points and not repeat, some of the same stuff, because that's all right on the money. So just a couple quick mechanical things. I mean, our CRM, when the lead goes in automatically into the CRM, it immediately kicks out an email that we've crafted. But we try to, I believe in our models, I believe in our story. I think we got a great story. So I want to get to them first, if at all possible, so that I can, talk to them about that story, because I think it's pretty convincing. So that email goes out, but then we try to get to the lead within the first couple of hours that we've received it, even if it's on the weekend, Tony. We will call between Ben or I, we will, if the lead comes in on Saturday, we're going to shoot them an email, we're going to call them, and at least, we may not do the program review, which is a lengthy call. Our first call is, we call it a program review. We may not do that program review on the weekend because they probably don't want to talk to us at length on the weekend either. So we're going to at least call them, make contact, and schedule a call, when it's convenient for them. In terms of scheduling calls, they don't always do that at our convenience, There have been, I can tell you, about so many instances where I had regularly scheduled calls with candidates that are at very inconvenient times for me. I was working with a father and son team in Arizona, and they both worked during the day, and the only time they could talk was when they got out of work. Well, they're 2 hours behind me, so our calls were every Thursday night at 10 o'clock, But that's my world. That's what we do, right? I had a candidate that she wanted to buy the business, and her parents were going to finance her. The only time all three of them could get together was on Sunday mornings. So we had regularly scheduled calls on Sunday mornings, it's what we do, right? So, so sometimes you've got to do that stuff, so listening, like these guys talked about, is critical. I want to learn everything I can about that candidate in the beginning. If it's a advertised lead, I don't have a profile to look at, okay? If it's a broker lead, I do. I get that and I'm going to look at that profile. I've lived in a lot of different places. I, know a lot of different people. So I look at that profile and I look for something common, something of common interest. What are their hobbies? Did they live in one of the places I lived in? I looked at one guy's profile one time and saw that he went to Hampton-Sydney and graduated from Hampton-Sydney in 1974. And one of my best friends graduated from there in 1974. He ended up being a frat brother of one of my best friends, So you look for those connections, you try to find that connection. It's fun. It's fun doing that because I bet you 40, 50% of the candidates I get, I find some connection, to talk to them about, with that. At the end of the first call, we'll ask them for a short form. If it wasn't a broker lead where we've got their profile, we'll ask them to complete a short form for us. We used to do a long form. We eliminated the long form. I don't need all that long form information, So, but learning about the candidate, listening to them, letting them talk. Most of them love talking about themselves, So let them do it and see what you can learn.
What information generally are you looking for on that short form?
On the short form, not much more than name, address, phone number, email address, and a couple quick financial questions, net worth, and see if they meet our criteria. That's all I need because as we progress, we're going to get more information, about that. And I don't ask them to fill it out on the internet or anything. That's at the end of the first call. We'll say, hey, I'm going to email you this form. Will you fill it out for me and send it back to me? We use a 6-step process. So one of the things, after I've learned about them, one of the things I want to do then is obviously tell them about us, okay, but also tell them exactly what my process is that I'm going to take them through over the next several weeks. Okay, I want them to have an expectation. You get some of the more aggressive candidates that say, when can I get your FDD? Can you send it to me today? No, I can't. Here's why. Here's the process we're going to go through, right? And so I detail out that 6-step process and tell them from beginning to end, and by going through that process, I'm going to be feeding you information. I'm going to be giving you information as we go through, and you're going to be at a point towards the end of the process where you can then make an educated decision as to whether or not it's the right fit for you. And I always tell them that as we're going through the process, I'm evaluating you as well to see if you're a good fit for us. And that's an important, part of the discussion is letting them know that it's not just your decision, it's also my decision, and I want to know that you're the right candidate for us. So those are all key things to me. We have multiple brands, as Tim does. So sometimes, when sometimes you get a broker lead, and sometimes they put a square peg into a round hole, right? And so I'm not necessarily going to rely on what brand the broker sent it to me for. I'm going to evaluate whether or not that's the right brand. And I'll give you an example. I had a guy a year ago that broker sent it to me for a repair brand resale. Okay, and when I looked at the guy's profile, I looked at his background. He had extensive executive experience. He had a lot of startup experience. And I looked at the profile and I talked to the guy for about the first 15 minutes. And I said, I got to tell you, this isn't for you. You're going to be bored to death if you do this. Okay, but then I said, but here's what I got for you. okay? And I pointed them to one of my other brands and said, this is what I recommend because of your retail background. You ought to look at my accessory brand, and you ought to look at doing multiple units in the accessory brand. Well, make a long story short, he came as a resale lead for an existing business, and he ended up buying a 5-pack of a different model, okay? Because I listened to him, I learned what he was about, and I made it a better fit, okay? So all of that, all that's critical, but explaining the process up front, letting them know what to expect so that they know when they're going to get the FDD, they know when they're going to get certain information, and you pass that through. But also, by doing it that way, and you all have heard this 100 times, I'm sure, you got to control the process, you know, and you get candidates who want to control the process, and you have to learn how to take control of that process, and in some cases, without letting them know you're taking control of the process, okay? And there's, you know, a lot of different ways to do that, you know. Another thing I'll point out is that obviously this doesn't happen with broker leads typically, okay, but with advertised leads. If one of my sales guys is working on the lead follow-up, my rule is you don't kill the lead until you've attempted to contact that lead 8 times over a 2-week period, okay? So combination, phone calls, emails, text messages, but you can't kill that lead until you've tried 8 times to reach them. If you've tried 8 times, and you don't try 8 times in 3 days, because you're going to drive them nuts and they're going to get pissed off at you.
And at different times of the day.
That's right.
and week,
So you got different times, and you spread it out over a couple-week period. But that's what we do, and that seems to work. That seems to work for us.
And the same question for you, Pete, just to keep it fair, to ask everybody the same question. Are there any key words or any key messages from the candidate that you're hoping to hear that help you say, yeah, you know what, I think this is the right kind of candidate?
Well, sure. And so, you know, when I say listen, you know, to the candidate, there's a little twist to that, okay? I'm listening to the candidate, but I'm asking the candidate very leading questions as well, okay? So I don't want to just, you know, sometimes you get people who will just start telling you story after story after story, and, you know, I may not be all that interested in that, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm asking them, so I'm listening, but I'm asking them a lot of leading questions to try to find out, you know, why they're motivated. Why are you looking at automotive? You know, what caused you to, you know, to take a look at us? What's important about that? What are your goals? What are your values? You know, what are your core values? What is it you want to accomplish? You know, about, you know, by starting your own business? What's your family situation? Is it a legacy situation? I mean, are you trying to build an empire? Are you trying to start a business for your kids? You know, you have kids that you want to put into the business. You know, what are all the reasons? You know, and so I'm looking for all that information, you know, to try to put the puzzle together.
Yeah.
You know, and see where we need to go with this thing down the road.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Peter, you said that when you have a great conversation with the candidate and you don't send in the FDD after that conversation, when do you send it? What do they have to do to be able to receive it?
Yeah, what they have to do, Red, is they have to sit with me through 2 calls. Okay, so at the end of the second call is when I send them the FDD.
What's the difference in the first and second?
Yeah, so the first call is what I call the program review, okay? And that's where I'm listening to them, I'm learning about them, I'm then telling them our story, why the automotive business is a good business to be in, why we're a good company to be within the automotive industry, you know, telling them about our process. Here's the process we're going to go through. So, and that call takes a good hour, you know, to get through that call. Then I'm going to give them a homework assignment, you know, at the end of that call. So I use a CRM, right? And they've got a password and a login where they can go in and, now I do it a little different in that I don't just open that CRM up, it's password protected, and I'm going to control the process with that CRM and what they get to look at. So I'm going to talk to them about this stuff first, then I'm going to open that module up and let them go in and look at it, okay? So that they're not jumping ahead, doing things, on their own. But the nice thing that I like about the CRM, Red, is that when I tell them something, okay, and then I open up that module, now they're seeing what I told them in writing, so it validates what I told them, So I think that's an important piece of it, It's not just me talking. Now they're seeing it, right? They're seeing the statistics, they're seeing the data, they're seeing it in the writing. So then the second call is more about, I start talking about support, okay? And then after that is when I release the FDD. And then when I send them the FDD, we always schedule an hour and a half to do a detailed FDD review. I don't send them that FDD and say, look at it. I send them the FDD and I say, I don't care if you look at it before our next call, okay, but I need you to block out an hour and a half, and I'm going to walk you through that FDD. If you want to start looking at it, feel free. If you haven't even opened it, I don't care, because I'm going to walk you through it, and I'm going to explain the entire FDD to you, okay?
And what would be the,
So that's why I wait. That's why I wait with that a little bit.
so what's the average age of your buyer?
Yeah. So in my mature, non-sexy industry, it's about 45 to 65. Yeah. Now, I say that, and we just, sold a 25-year-old millennial the other day, okay? But that's kind of unusual for us. But most of them, it's that last career move. That's who we see typically, And it's because, and I look for this too. I look for that, some kind of passion, A lot of times with the candidates we're getting, when I explore, why are you looking at automotive? What I find a lot of times is that the ones who buy because they had some kind of automotive passion. Not that they were an automotive professional, because they're not, right? But when I was a teenager, I used to restore cars, or I've got 3 classic cars in my garage. I ride motorcycles. So I'm looking for that passion, and the candidates who have some kind of passion like that are usually the ones that that we end up awarding a franchise to.
I think you had a
Does that help?
question.
To your point, Peter, explaining the process, right up front, I'm going to bring in another one of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits that Tim was. But I'd like to tell them that we're going to begin with the end in mind here. And I'll tell them, the first thing I'll tell them is that we're going to get together at the end of this process, if you like us and we like you. And you're going to sign franchise agreements, we're going to have dinner, and we're going to celebrate. And I like to, I like to kick it off that way. And then once I explain it to them, walking them backwards through it, it makes a lot of sense.
So you explain the process, but just start at the end
Yeah.
and walk back. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting, because
Yeah.
if you listen
Yeah.
to what everybody has said, first of all, listen, right? I mean, that's the key word that everybody said, listen. When we've progressed in the award process, going from, here's everything what you need to know about us, right? We take 45, 50, 60 minutes to talk all about us, never once listen if that's what the candidate had in mind or what they were looking for. So in terms of a summary, one is listen so that you have a good understanding of who your candidate is, but at the same time, explain the process. Let them know what the expectation is and help them understand that how you're taking them through the journey is all about making sure that this is right for you. As important as it is for us to make sure that you're right for us, just as importantly, it has to feel right for you. And let me facilitate that for you, right? Let me help you. And we'll take it through. And so this week, you get their commitment, they're engaged. I remember one deal I'd done when I was leaving Dunkin' Donuts. I was doing it was a 10-store multi-unit agreement for Florida, for South Florida. And the candidate, and I always made it a point, always to sign the agreements in person, at least the multi-unit ones. Always met them. I would fly to where they were and meet with them. And I would always ask them the same question: why did you choose to sign with us? And most of the time, it was always the same two answers. They would say, we trust you, and you were always the first one to call and follow up when you said you would do something. So it's just very simple common sense, right? If you say you're going to do something, that's what they want. But in this particular case, the two partners were in the restaurant business already, well experienced. They were VPs of operations for a large quick service restaurant, and before I even had the chance to meet them, I met them in Miami. Before I even had the chance to ask the question, he said to me, he says, Tony, I've got to tell you, he says, I've been through a lot of sales calls, and, we sell franchises ourselves, but I've never met anybody who made it so difficult for me to buy a franchise. So I pretended I didn't understand what he meant, and I said, well, what do you mean? He says, every time we spoke, you challenged me, and you were trying to find out why this was not right for me, and I had to help you believe. So I looked at my sponsor, well, I did my job then, right? Because that's what it's all about. It's a 20-year franchise agreement. It's a marriage. We want to make sure, I want to give you the benefit of everything you need to know about the business that I can tell you, so that when we do execute the documents, we know what to expect. So there should be few surprises. So it's really around setting the right expectations. Know, if possible, know who your best profile is. In some cases it applies, in some cases it doesn't. It depends on the business. But if you see that your top performing franchisees have a certain background, so for example at Goddard, by coincidence, our top performing franchisees all had masters, or at least the masters, and some had a doctorate degree. So it helped us tailor our marketing activity towards more of an education base, because it fit in with our best performers. So in your business, the same thing. If you can get to understand who your best franchisees are, what their demographics are, or profiling, it helps you target, and then you're looking for that same thing. Now, as you go through the whole process and you realize that, obviously the intent is to walk them through and get them to signing, and regardless of what your length is, whether it's a 60-day process or a 120-day process or a 9-month process, inevitably it's going to happen at some point. The candidate is engaged, so it's not because they're not engaged, so you're not losing them, but you determine that candidate may not be the right candidate. Right, so the challenging question now is, okay, you've taken them down to a certain point, and very often, it doesn't always happen up front, right? It could take through the process, maybe right up through discovery date. That's the close of your process, and you realize that candidate is not right. So 2 questions for each of you. How do you determine if that candidate is not right? What are you looking for? And then, if that's the case, how do you tell them? How do you, after all that time together, how do you disengage?
Tony, before we go there,
Sure.
could I ask the group just a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
Of the franchisors in the room, how many of you do a discovery day? Okay, quite a few. How many of you don't do a discovery day? Okay, just a couple. And also, do any of you, as opposed to doing a discovery day, do any of you do a field visit, in the candidate's market? Few, okay.
Instead of, or?
Instead of a discovery day, You do it in addition to,
Yeah,
okay,
right, flexible.
yeah.
I've done it as instead of, where we had what we believe was a very strong candidate, and because of timing considerations, we just couldn't. So I flew out and I spent a day with them.
Yeah, I have
a day
to.
and a half.
In discovery, I'll share one thing with you that we started doing recently, and I'd like to take credit for the idea, but I can't. It was
go
a
ahead.
friend
Go
of
ahead.
mine who
We'll let you.
talked about it. But we, at Discovery Day now, we, in advance, tell the candidate that when they come to Discovery Day, that they have to do, that, they're going to meet with our management team, and they have to do a presentation to the management team about why they want to, why they're there, why they want to start this business, why we should consider them as a good fit, and it's really been great. It's really worked terrific in that and it's not, I mean, it's not they don't have to prepare PowerPoints or anything like that. Just get up and talk to the management team, And part of it is, we want the management team to really get to know you and determine whether, help us determine whether or not you're a good fit. But that's been kind of an interesting and fun process with the candidates. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got you off
Not at
track.
all, Tim. So how do you know, like, what are the signs that this is not the right candidate? And once you've determined that those are the signs, how do you tell them?
So disengaging, people in sales want to please, and they want to be liked, and they want to be successful. So I handle it really two ways. There's the customer disengagement, and then running a global sales organization. It's how do I teach the salespeople that work for me how to disengage on deals that will never happen. So I think the first one with the customer is just being very straightforward, transparent, and honest. I don't know if you read the book Moneyball or saw the movie Billy Bean by Brad Pitt. He says to Jonah Hill, fire him, cut him. And he couldn't do it. And his advice was just be straightforward and upfront. And again, if you want to be treated with respect, you have to treat people with respect. So I think people really appreciate that. I think the easiest advice I tell my sales organization is ask the prospect, where are we in the processes? Let them tell you where we are. And then ask the question, have I helped you with your wants and needs? Yes. Have I been responsive to you? Yes. Well then, let me take the ball and give it back to you, because there's certain things that you need to do before I can grant you a franchise. Let's talk about the equity. You're light. You're about half light. So you need to go out and get a partner, and based on the construction cost and the turnkey cost, you have 10% of the equity, and through the banks, based on our knowledge, you'll need 30%, and if you go SBA, you'll need 25%. So go back, get your equity together, and then re-engage with me. So I try to fill wants and needs. Other times, it might just be a bad fit, and there's nothing wrong with saying this is a bad fit. It's not for everyone. We don't see the passion. We don't see the hands-on approach. Most, we have 6 brands. Some of our brands, very hands-on operators. They're actually at the stores. You come up, they're literally working there. We have others that are multi-unit, well, you'll never find an owner in there because they have 50, 60, 70 stores. I think the most important thing running a sales organization is teaching your sales people that work underneath you the value of time. What I like to do is just take a pen, put it in their hand, take out a piece of paper, and say there's 24 hours in a day. How many hours do you sleep? Now, I know most of my salespeople sleep 8 to 10 hours, but they tell me 6. How many hours you work? 12. So I go back to them, well, you have 6 hours to live your life every day. So when you put the value of time to the salesperson up front, and you have a lot of demand coming in, you'll be a better qualifier and prospector, because now you're starting to understand and look at it, and you're writing it out. And the other thing, we do weekly calls, monthly calls, quarterly calls. If you want to hit 50 home runs, you got to get up to bat, call it 1,500 to 2,000 times. Well, a lot of times I'll just say to my salespeople, you don't have enough pitches to hit to get to your quota. And let's go through and qualify who you're talking to. And I can tell if they're really working the process, because you'll see new people that constantly come up on a weekly basis, monthly basis. I get concerned when I see the same names on a piece of paper for 2 quarters. And I was told at an early age, prospects will fire you and say, well, this brand's not for me. What I try to talk to my sales organization about is firing prospects who are not qualified. We're just wasting your time. But you're doing a very poor job of asking the hard questions. So when I look at disengagement, when I look at it from a consumer standpoint or prospect standpoint, the easy advice is just be upfront. understand what they needed, and then just putting the ball back in their hands and directing them so their dream and their investment can be successful, and then they can get into it. And it's like being a quarterback. You have to direct, and you have to instruct. And no's okay, but you have to give them direction of what they need, and then say, the ball's in your court when you have what you need, whether it's the equity, the debt, the location, maybe they don't have the experience. When you get that, then call me, and I'll do everything I can to make sure you'll be successful.
Tim, I like the way you said that, always treat them with respect, because that's first and foremost, right? I mean, obviously, it's not an easy message to tell somebody that you've been working with 2 months, a month and a half, 3 months, whatever the time, and have to tell them, you know what, after careful consideration, we don't think we're a right fit. So talk to them the way you would expect to be spoken to. But having said that, though, Tim, and I hope it probably doesn't happen that often, but when you do have that conversation, what kind of reaction do you typically get from the candidates? Do most of them say, yeah, I get it, or do you get pushback, or probably all of the above, right?
It's a great question, Tony, because if they have a bad reaction, you did a poor job laying out expectation. You did a poor job as a salesperson or running a sales organization if you can't meet the expectation of a prospect, a customer, or a franchisee. So I put it on my salesperson that, you know, it's not them. It's what you said to them and the lack of direction you gave them and an understanding.
Great point, thank you. Noelle, what about your experience? Your experiences?
Yeah, I would just say communicate. People drop out. You tell them they're not a good fit for all different reasons, and it might be financial, and if you can provide them an opportunity that works for them, that's great. So like finding a business partner, if that's an option, then that's a great way to give them a next step or another way to come back to you in regards to the opportunity. But if somebody is not wanting to follow the process, just kind of communicate, this is the process that we have, this is why we have you do these things. But a lot of times they'll just disengage in the fact that you can tell it's not a good fit, they know it's not a good fit. But just communicate with them honestly and openly and say, this is kind of where we're at.
And
call them, email them, talk to them.
Sorry. In terms of your approval process, who typically approves a candidate? Is there like a committee, or is it one person? Is it the sales manager?
Yeah, so it's everybody. So we take them through the sales process. They come in for discovery day, and then our discovery days, they meet a lot of people, and they meet with the entire executive team. And so after that, we do kind of a discussion or a huddle in regards to how the day went. We talk about the candidate and see if everybody's on the same page and whether it's a good fit, it's not a good fit. There are times where people have questions, and we'll just go back and say, hey, we want to re-engage on this question or this side of the business, and revisit that. But it's generally everybody together makes the decision.
And it's typically a yes, no, or, well, let's clarify this, right?
Yep.
So where there are no's, I mean, that's probably even harder to go back, because it's at the end, it's at the very end of the process.
Yep.
And I would assume that up to that point, would the sales executive have a sense that there would be a problem? Or, again, or does it go to Tim's point in terms of, well, if you're operating your process well, you also should be aware of potential issues?
Yeah, I think, though, those are addressed as you're going through the entire process. So, like I said, it's myself and another gentleman named Steve, so we're pretty good at communicating back and forth in regards to, and if there's a question that he has, maybe I'll do a call with that person and explain, we explain who each other are, and maybe I have a different view on it, and then we kind of talk about the situation and see, is it maybe the personality, is it something that we need to discuss in regards to the change in our process? Was there a miscommunication, or why is it that there's something that's coming up at this point? But generally, when they get to the point where they come in for discovery day, they have generally a very good idea of what the expectations are.
And they've done
have set
validation.
They
would have done
validation
before, so all the issues would have come up.
Yep.
Okay. And same question for you. Have you ever had any odd or unique reactions from your candidates when you've told them, no, sorry?
No,
Okay.
no. Last year, we had said, you know, we got to the very end, and it just wasn't, they had some financial stuff that came up at the very end that it just wasn't gonna work out, and I actually ended up calling somebody that I met here and saying, it's a great candidate for another brand, but it's not for us, and they ran with it, and was great. So if you're gonna, you know, there's a fit somewhere for them, and you've had to develop a relationship over a certain period of time, and if you can help that person succeed in life and help them get a business open, it's a great feeling, and, you know, you've done a good job.
Well, we have a $5,000 referral program. I'll give you my business card over here.
Pete, how about you?
Yeah, so, well, we're on that topic. I always, you know, feel pretty strongly that we shouldn't be eliminating many people at the discovery day.
Right.
Okay? We should have eliminated them throughout our six-step process, you know? And the only ones that should get invited to discovery day should be the ones that we feel are a good, strong candidate, you know? So if we're eliminating people, if we're saying no about people that are at discovery day, we failed in the process somewhere, you know? So, but
And Pete, to that point, on that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but on that sixth point, what are some of the issues that you've seen that have made you decide that candidate, or some of the things
Yeah.
they've done or not done? that
Yeah,
made you
so
decide
so
they're
it's
not
not
right?
so it's not a matter of it never happening, because it does happen, you know, I mean, sometimes, for example, I mean, if somebody, when we run their background check and their credit check and all that, and they tell us they had a good credit score, and the credit score comes in at 650, well, we have a difference in what we consider to be a good credit score or not, okay? You know, so that's an issue. Or they can't validate their finances. You know, they can't, you know, prove to us that they actually have, you know, the equity to move forward, you know? So I've had, you know, situations, you know, I mean, I had one guy years ago that we ran the background check, and he was a felon. He never told us, you know.
I think we've
And
all had some.
he
of
was
those.
at, you know, he was at Discovery Day when we found out he was a felon,
wow.
you know. So, you know, one of the things that's important to me, it's kind of my pet peeve, okay, when you talk about disengaging a candidate. I mentioned before that we use a CRM, and I don't tell the candidates, you know, up front that I can see all their activity in the CRM, and I don't tell them for a reason, you know. But every time I go, so I always give them a homework assignment in between calls and say, okay, for our next call, I want you to review this module, you know, and, you know, and then we'll talk about it, right? So before that next call, first thing I do is I get on the CRM and I look at their activity before I call them to see what they looked at, see what PDFs they opened,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And my pet peeve is you get on the call with the candidate and the candidate, and I say, well, did you have a chance to review all that information? And they tell you, oh, yeah, I looked at it. You have any questions? No, I don't have any questions. And I just looked at the CRM, and they didn't open the first thing, you know? So that's a core value issue for me, okay? And I'm done with that candidate at that point, you know, and I'm going to tell them why. You know, it's, you know, you can't lie to me on the phone and tell me that you looked at the stuff and you didn't look at it. You know, that's my number one, that's my number one disengagement issue, you know. Not that it happens often, but when it does, I don't want them, you know.
I think it's interesting. That's a good point you brought up. You know, a lot of times with disengaging, I'm not there to prove a point. I'm not right. I'm not wrong. The only thing I'm trying that I can control is managing my prospect. So I'm not, you know, I'm more on the line, not making a point, but understanding how the customer feels, and then delivering on his experience. So really, a lot of times, it's just putting the ball back in their hands. So they're not upset, and, you know, they don't have a bad experience, or they tell, you never know, like, life is a two-way street, and sometime in sales, you have so many things happening, and you're traveling, and you have all the prospects coming in, and it's not what you say, it's how you say it to people.
You're always treating them with respect and dignity, you know, so that, because, you know, and I've had many times, over the years, had candidates that would disengage, whether I disengaged them for a reason or they disengaged themselves, you know. And look, life happens. Sometimes circumstances dictate that they can't move forward at a particular time, even when they intended to, you know. And, you know, they find out, you know, that, you know, somebody in their family's sick, their parents, you know, whatever happens, you know, you start having trouble with a kid, or what, you know, and they've got to disengage. And I've had many times, I've had those people, if you treat them right and you treat them with dignity and respect, and you make sure they understand that the door is open if they want to come back. Many times I've had those candidates come back 6 months later, a year later, and end up becoming a franchisee, you know?
The personality, I would imagine, like we're speaking of, is probably the hardest part to disengage about with someone. How do you best deliver that message when personality, when you know it's going to be a conflict and not a good fit?
Yeah, you know, I haven't had, you know, I don't know about these guys. I haven't had, I really can't remember a confrontational disengagement, in all honesty. I mean, if you're treating them right throughout the process and you treat them with dignity and respect, if you're disengaging them, you know, a lot of times the reaction is simply, yeah, I kind of sensed that, you know, it probably wasn't for me. And I honestly can't remember having a confrontational disengagement.
It happens, though. I mean, you get people that are irate, and some people just like to argue, and you disengage. But I think the humble thing to do is just to say, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I let you down. I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
And thanks for pointing it out. You know, I get pulled in usually at the end of the sale, or there's an issue, or we have an impact, or two people want it, and it doesn't matter what I say, they're going to be pissed off. So I think the easiest thing to do is humble pie and apologize and own it, and not try to make
hang
your
up.
point. Yeah, well, yeah, and
I
then
mean-
you try to get out, yeah, but.
You know,
Yeah.
the cost of awarding a franchise to the wrong candidate is tremendous. Your ability to get rid of them later on, if you have to, when they were the wrong candidate and they're not a good fit, is very costly and very time-consuming. And so you really don't want to be there if you don't have to, and it's not worth the sale, you know?
Not the least of which, remembering that most of them are gonna be consumers for our brand possibly too.
Yeah.
That's true, good
yeah,
point.
Yeah,
So you don't want to
That's right.
piss them off altogether, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the CRM you're using?
We use Process Peak. I still use it, I still like it. They were bought out by,
FranConnect.
you know, by FranConnect, but they're still supporting it, you know. I'm a little concerned that at some point FranConnect's going to change the game and I may have to switch, you know, make a decision. So I'm kind of preempting that with the research that I need to do to be prepared for that, you know. But I really do like that platform, you know, and it's been really effective for us. And I've had, you know, great feedback from candidates, you know, about, you know, going through our process with that tool versus, you know, other models that they've looked at, you know. So it's worked for us.
So we just have 1 minute left, but we have one last question. Go ahead.
Curious, how many do you access to the candidates' social media profiles to make judgment calls on their cultural fit?
LinkedIn, usually, I do LinkedIn.
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question, yeah.
I always look them up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Before I even call them, I look them up on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
And that serves a dual purpose, not just to find out if there's something peculiar, but also, it also shows that you care. So at that first call, for example, I think it was this yesterday, one of the sessions yesterday, where one of the, I don't know if it was a pre-qualifier or the sales executive who did it, but before they returned all that first call, they actually looked them up, just so that to see, and I think, Pete, you mentioned it as well, right? You know, that if you share anything in common or just something about them that helps to start building that relationship, because awarding a franchise is really all about creating a relationship. I mean, it's trust, it's credibility, it's a marriage contract, right? So the more that you show that you care about your partner, your potential partner, your future partner, it really goes a long way. And at the same time, if there's something that shows up, it gives you an opportunity to question why. So on that note, unfortunately, we ran out of time. Thank you very, very much for your attendance. And please fill out the surveys if you would. Thank you. Thanks for your time.